So without any further ado, Daniel, we're all yours.
Thank you, Karim, and thank you for coordinating this event. Thank you to RASC Montreal Chapter for having me tonight. Race to the Moon 2.0, exciting subject. And to me, fascination for the moon started in the 60s, seeing the human landing live on TV. And I don't know how many in the room have seen it live. Yeah, that's pretty good. More than half. What an exciting moment. And I didn't know at the time it would trigger my own career in space field. So Race to the Moon, we'll talk about. Let me go to the second page. Works. Okay. So this is a kind of a hybrid presentation. Not only is it online and is it in presence, but also the slides are in French, and I'll do the talk in English, of course. So what are we going to talk tonight? We're going to talk about this mystic side of the moon a little bit to start with, the original race to the moon. And then if there was an intermission with all these efforts to go to the moon, we seem to think that there was nothing between 1973 and 2022 or something, but there were missions. And then we'll talk about the race 2.0. All right, so it's been fascinating for civilizations for thousands of years, the moon. And so it started with mythology. Our interest was, I guess, jellified, if I can say, with mythology. And so for many thousands of years, people have had god and goddesses, different civilizations have had different god and goddesses. You see this mouse? Or you don't see the mouse? All right. So let me just try something here. This. See the mouse now? Yeah. Okay. So you see the mouse online? They can't answer. Okay. So you can see the Greeks down, Chinese people, they all had god and goddesses, and the moon has different genres. Depending if you talk to Muslims, for instance, it's male. If you talk to French people, it's female, and so it's different approach to the moon as a god or a goddess. But after mythology comes religion, and so I just talked about the Muslims, but the moon is used to synchronize many of the events we know, Easter for those who are Christians and so on. Muslims or Ramadan just ended a few days ago. So they had also, the moon was so important that they associated this with the most important mystical aspect and religious aspect of their lives. And of course, there was the Minions moon. So the original race to the moon, I thought it was important to mention the firsts because there were many, and they're not only putting the human foot on the surface of the moon, but it's important to see the sequence that occurred at that time. So the first to reach the surface was in Luna 2, 1959, USSR. The first images from the dark side of the moon, Pink Floyd would say, was also in 59. First landing, 66. First inhabited landing, Apollo 11, obviously in 1969. And the first robot that was remotely controlled from the ground was Luna 17 in 1970. So we all know what triggered this race, this amazing race. Sputnik at the top, I show here, 1957, triggered a large race and amazing investments in going to the moon. It was very exciting to watch. I was very lucky to be able to watch a few of these things. I remember with my brother and I, we lived Levy across the river from Quebec City, and we would write in our best English a letter to NASA HQ, asking them 1969, 1970 for astronaut autographs. And we got them all from all the Apollo missions. We were very lucky, and I remember I was very young, very small, and looking at a table at home, there was this big brown envelope, and I could see the NASA logo, and the counter was this, and I could see the NASA logo. It was very exciting. I still remember today. So a lot of money invested. It's interesting to remember the quickness of these missions, because Apollo 11 was in July 1969 and Apollo 17 was December 1972. 3 and some years and a few months, with a big bill to pay, $250 billion estimated in 2022 money. So it was a very large endeavor, and it's difficult a little bit today to put ourselves in that mood, but we'll see how many efforts occur today. And that's me 11 years after the last mission, 40 years ago in the Kennedy Space Center, beside one of the 5 engines that powers the Saturn V rocket. This is an F1 engine, and it was quite impressive to see. So to put ourselves in this moon of reaching the moon and putting all the possible efforts to get there, let's watch a combination of some launches. Technology. 1969, trying to realize all right, it's just every time I see it, it's still amazing today. Now, after all this emotion, let's look at the moon in parts. So one example, Joseph Wright of Derby, if you've seen his painting on the internet, this is 1787 called Lake by Moonlight with Castle on the Hill. And he made paintings that had the moon in it all the time. Very, very precise paintings, and the moon was extraordinary. All right, let's leave the arts, go back to business here. Now, was there an intermission really after 1973 or the 1972, the last mission, Apollo mission? It looks like there isn't. From 1973 to 2022, there were 130 missions with the goal of going to the moon. They were not all successful, but this is the list of all the missions that have occurred, including 2022. So that's quite a few missions, the usual suspects, and then, but also Japan, India, European Union, Luxembourg, and Israel. So if you plot these missions to the moon across the time scale at the bottom, 1972, bottom left, you get these missions, the number of missions, 1 to 3, and there was a gap. Whoops, there was a gap between 78 and 1990, but otherwise there were missions several years, including those that I list in the yellow box, and we'll talk about a couple of those now. So the first one is Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Quite a few iris pictures in 2001. You can find this at very interesting. whatever. Published every year. So, that's bottom right. January, February, the new migration as well. There was also Selene, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Kaguya in Japanese. Japan effort to the moon from 2007 to 2009. They had HD cameras on board, and this is a live view. This is as it was streamed to the ground, and the Earth rise, just like Apollo 8 saw it. But this is the speed at which it was going around the moon. This is live speed. I thought it was interesting to show. So Japan effort to go to the moon already at that time. I believe it was the first mission of that country to the moon. Then there was the Google Lunar X Prize. We forgot about this, but it was an interesting effort announced in 2007 by a billionaire. And the prize was that if you can send a robot on the surface, and it does 500 meters, it runs for rolls for 500 meters, and you can send high resolution video and images back to the ground on Earth, then you win the prize. And so what's interesting is that the original limit date was 2012, changed for the years because nobody could get even close. It went to 2018. The prize was changed from 15 to $30 million. But in the end, it was canceled in January 2018. And in 2018, there were five companies left, Space IL and so on. And remember that last thing, hakuto, sorry. Remember that one. But there was still only one, I guess, amount of money given for the Space IL effort from Israel because their lander actually got really close to the surface control, but then the control was lost, and it made it to the surface, probably not in good enough shape to communicate back to Earth. But still, they were given $1 million prize at the time. Now let's talk about China during the intermission. At the time, they published a 4-phase plan, and they implemented a big part of it. So the first one is to just get in orbit around the moon, Chang'e 1 and 2. Managed to do that. Then there were the lunar landings, yes, they've done it, and a rover, Chang'e 3 and 4. And what you see at the bottom here, bottom left, is Chang'e 4 picture of plants that are growing on the moon, not on the using moon soil, but using Earth soil brought to the moon and in an incubator inside the spacecraft. In 2019, they managed to grow plants. And we can see a few of those images. So it's important to mention that. They even, with the later missions, Chang'e 5, 2020, managed to return samples to the ground. So we're talking over a kilo 7 of samples, and they discovered a new mineral in it. Chang'e 7. Very interesting. Not very publicized because it's China, but nevertheless very interesting. Pictures on the right are real pictures of the lander and the robot and the rover. And they're planning Chang'e 6 for 2024 and a lunar research station. That's their original plan at the time. Keep that in mind. Now, let's go to Race to the Moon 2.0. That's why we're here. Why? Why do we go again to the moon? It's important to remember that the most missions that have been sent to the moon, and in fact, all the human missions, have been to the equator, close to the equator, not very far, not to the poles. And ice was discovered at the poles on the moon. We all know that. And that's one of the targets. Now, it's interesting also to remember that when you do geological studies on the surface of the moon, you have a very relatively close surface with no erosion, unlike Mars, for instance, or other moons, other planets. So there is no erosion on the moon. So that's interesting also from a scientific point of view. And humans have been proven to be adaptable to choose samples. And so that will help the science side. Also, we're en route to Mars. Mars is 200 times further away than the moon. You better know everything there is to know, and you better be very well organized if you want to go to Mars, and moon is a good stepping stone to get there. Now, the moon is 1,000 times further away in, let's say, altitude or distance from the Earth than the International Space Station. It's not linear with the energy to get to the moon. It's not 1,000 times the amount of energy to get to the ISS, but still, those are big numbers, and a lot of effort is required to go to Mars. And so to get to the moon, at least it's an intermediary position. And also bring back human presence in the solar system outside of the Earth, of course. So this is the route to Mars. With the Apollo 1960s, you had a lot of new technologies. Miniaturization was one, fly-by-wire, and other type of technologies, communication, they have to develop completely. And so you can expect the same thing for the race to the moon and then going to Mars. Now, to me, the big challenges, having been at the Space Agency for 16 years and in the space private sector for 18 years before that, the health of the astronauts will be a big challenge, I feel. Psychology will be very challenging as well. And I don't know how they would choose the mission. Will they choose couples to go on missions? Will they choose, they have all kinds of psychological aspects. I've learned a little bit about these aspects, asking for an astronaut psychologist, one of the psychologists in Canada that was in the committee to choose the Canadian astronauts. What was the psychological, I guess, patterns that were required to make an astronaut, to make a good astronaut? That was interesting. But psychology to go to the moon and Mars will be a challenge. Radiation, again, they can surround themselves with water to absorb part of the radiation. There's always some type of radiation that is not absorbed easily. They will have to learn to repair things on board and reuse things on board. That's currently very little, very little. All the hardware I worked on for space was always very, very special for our application. It was a mix of what the customer wanted. The customer wanted something very specific. And so the engineers work at providing that very specific item, and you're being paid for that. But standardization was not an issue. Even on the space station, I guess a lot of things are standardized. A lot of things are checked to make sure that the hardware you send to the space station is compatible. For instance, all the fonts and the LED colors you have on your front panel is completely standardized. Stick document that describes the font you can use and the colors you can use. And the LED, does it flash? Is it yellow, green, red? All kinds of amber, all kinds of the requirements. So we still have a bit to do to get to Mars, to get things standardized, reusable between pieces of hardware. Remember Apollo 13 when they have to mix filters and a square filter for a round hole and stuff. They will have to eliminate all of that to go to Mars. So the moon will be a good trial for that. It will also, going to the moon will be inspiring. It's inspiring for next generations, like it inspired me. I can imagine that happening for future generations. Also, national credibility. When you participate in a very large program like the space station, you're very visible. When we provided the Canadarm, the first generation, to the space shuttle effort in the US, and one of the TV images showed the Canadarm with the flag in the foreground, people phoned NASA and asked, is the shuttle built in Canada? And so when you see the mission of the space shuttle with the big American flag in the back, that's the mission following the mission where they showed the Canadarm for the first time. So the credibility of your country can be shown this way. Also, programs I participated in with the government of Canada show that helping the best companies, the high-tech companies in Canada, is a big item. It's part of your investment. And if you go to the Treasury Board and you ask them for funds, for sure they will verify that you have some return on the investment, not only for Canadians, but also for the industry. It's important to support them. So all these reasons. Now, future missions, if you look on the net, you'll find quite a few missions are listed. Now, 37 robotic missions, different countries. You can see them on the screen. You can read faster than I can talk. 4 inhabited ones are financed, and then 17 robotic ones where the financing is uncertain, and 3 inhabited ones as well where the financing is uncertain. So I can't present everything. So we'll have to choose. Let's talk about an easy one. Cooperation, Russia and ESA. Russia has not been to the moon since 1976 with Luna 24, when they returned some samples from the moon. So the new mission is Luna 25. And ESA was to provide a camera. That was ESA's role, provide a camera and navigation. And since the invasion of Ukraine, ESA retracted from that project. They said, we're not going to cooperate with the Luna missions anymore. Anyway, Luna 25 is, last time I checked, the day before yesterday, still on date of launch, 13th of July this year. It will be important to see. Now, the Director General of Roscosmos did mention that Luna 26 and 27 will be delayed. Here's some hardware. That's Luna 25 on the right. And they will target towards the pole. So already not exactly at the pole, but pretty close, much closer than the other mission. Oops. Yep. Okay. Now, China, second part. China has planned these missions. It's on the screen. 4 missions in 24 up to 28. The first one is a communication. That's been added in the last 6 months. This one is a communication system, relay around the moon, and then Chang'e 6, 7, 8. And in growing complexity, all on Long March 5 launchers, orbiter lander for number 6 towards the South Pole, orbiter lander rover for Chang'e 7, and then Chang'e 8, kind of unknown, with we'll test new technologies. So at that time, they said we're going to reach for manned missions after 2030. We're not too sure exactly. But then cooperation between Russia and China evolved after 2020. What happened in 2020 in October, remember that date, October 2020, the Director General of Roscosmos mentioned that the Lunar Gateway project is too US-centric, and that they were going to refrain from participating big time, but they might participate, but they won't participate in a big way in the Lunar Gateway with the US. And they were expecting the Lunar Gateway program, Artemis. Gateway is part of Artemis, we'll talk about that. They were expecting that to be managed the same way as the ISS. If you look at the ISS, you can find the governmental agreements on the internet between Canada, for instance, and the US. And you see in their cooperation and the way you approach things for such a large program. It's been working since the early 90s, the ISS program, changed name and stuff, but it's been working with Russia. Now here, Russia is saying it's too US-centric. Now, they signed an agreement with China in March 2021, just a few months after. They sent an invitation, an open invitation to other countries to join, and they published a plan, a joint plan available on the internet in June 2021. This is a link. If I was to click on this link, I would go to a plan, a joint plan in English of Russia and China going to the moon. I haven't seen that before, so that was interesting. And there were at the time rumors that they were talking with ESA, but I put an X on ESA because of Ukraine, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand. That was at the time, 2021. Now, this is the plan or a diagram that was in their plan published in June 2021. I don't know how good you can see this information on the screen, but it's a sequence of alternating Chinese and Russian missions. Oh, there it is. It's an alternating series of Luna missions and Chang'e missions. So you start to see integration between the Luna and Chang'e up until 2030. And this is just reconnaissance at that time. So there are landers, rovers, and so on. From 2030 onward, you get much larger launchers, new rockets, Long March 9, that's a new rocket. And I believe the Russian rocket is new as well. Now this is, sorry?
Ingara.
It could be.
It looks
Yeah,
like.
yeah, that's what it is. Exactly, that's good. Thank you, Vic. And this is construction of the moon base. It's in the upper right. And then after 2035, utilization. Utilization is a strange word. It's used also in the ISS. It means really utilizing the surface, but also payloads and science. It's synonymous with science and payloads utilization. So their manned space would start in 2035. That was their plan in 2021. So corporation, yes.
What's sort of relative height there for the 2030? How big are they?
Oh, how big are they? I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Good question.
That's about as tall as a Falcon.
This one? Yeah. It's not bigger than a Falcon 9. Okay.
Well,
So,
it's just wider with the
Right,
boosters,
right.
but it's about that height, give or take,
Okay,
if I'm not
okay.
mistaken.
all right. Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. So they're bigger rockets than what they have now. And that should be exciting to see. So they're planning big investment, many launches for this cooperation in the future. So I thought it was good to see at least two countries cooperating in space. No matter what the countries are, I always think cooperation is good. Now, very recent update, 25th of April this year, China announced at a conference that they had signed agreements, Russia, Argentina, Pakistan, United Arab Emirates, and Brazil. They open to other participation, including the mentioned United States and European countries. And at the bottom here, very important, China will, without a doubt, be capable of landing astronauts on the moon before 2030. So that's different than the plan we started. This is 2 years later in the planning phase. In the back is the latest picture I got from their station, lunar station, and you can see the satellites at the top used for communication with the lunar stations. And they're reaching, oh, that's very small. They're reaching the South Pole, and they're aiming at Shackleton, Unsworth, also remember these names because we'll see them a little bit later on. Now, let's go to other missions. Do you know Deer Moon? Who knows about Deer Moon? Yeah, it hasn't been in the media that much, but it was announced in September 2021. Japanese billionaire who, in the meantime, went to the space station as a paying customer in 2021. He has reserved a Starship from SpaceX to go to the moon, around the moon, with 8 artists. This is very different than anything we've known before. So he's going with specifically artists. And one of them, more than one of them, is American. But you have Japanese artists and other artists around the world. They would be there for 6 days, but they won't launch in 2023, probably, or a bit later. But it's very interesting, billions of dollars, I'm sure. And I wouldn't be surprised that the money that he paid or paid for this launch is being used right now by the launching company SpaceX to develop the famous spaceship. So it's interesting. Other unknown missions to the moon, I thought it was important to mention them because we hear about race to the moon, but we don't hear about the small missions. We hear about the inhabited ones sometimes, but we don't hear about the small ones. The top one here is Capstone, already launched from New Zealand last year. It's using the same orbit as Gateway. It's going to be trying that with LRO. It's trying a software that will help navigation with the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that I talked about before. And this is a cooperation with NASA. It's a CubeSat, not very big. 12U is probably, I don't know, this big, 12U. It's a U is 4 by 4 by 4, 100 millimeters by 100. The 12U is very small, 25 kilograms. And they had problems with communication propulsion, not surprising for a small, it's probably a very small budget. But they have been in orbit since December 2022. Also, Dennis Tito. Who remembers Dennis Tito? He was the first, yes, he was the first commercial tourist to go to space. He did so to the ISS in 2001 on the Soyuz. And he announced in October last year that he's going to go with his wife, Akiko Tito, he's going to be one of the passengers. They're going to be passengers on the spaceship, SpaceX again. And he would do it if it's done within the next 5 years. Now, if it's done in the 5th year, it's going to be 87 years old. Wow. So anyway, big announcement in October, if you look for it. And you know about the mission Daniel, South Korea mission, already launched with Falcon 9 in August 22. I didn't know about that one at all. When I searched on the internet, found all those small missions are interesting. It's been in lunar orbit since December. This is a little bit bigger, 678 kilograms. Substantial amount of money, still not big when you go to a mission to the moon, but anyway, it's still relatively big. A mission that will last for a year. One camera is provided by NASA, University of Arizona, and this is what you see in the background. This image in the background was done in December. Very nice pictures of the Earth, black and white. And upper right, you see an image of the spacecraft, and lower right, you see one of the craters that they photographed. It's very close to the South Pole. Interesting information for the big missions coming up to go to the lunar South Pole. Next phase will be with a lander, 2025. Moon in the arts again. Brain. Aliens. Everyone first. Very inspiring. Just imagine. Text. Fired by Charles Byrne. All right, let's go back to business. All right, let's go with the big missions now. The Artemis program. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the Artemis Accords, because that's very important for what we've seen before with Russia. In October 2020, same conference that the Russian Director General went to and made a statement. The United States took initiative to provide a treaty to be signed by countries, just like the United Nations did in the 1960s. The United Nations had a few treaties for the management of outer space, the exploration and use of outer space. This is one of the major agreements that countries are supposed to obey by. But the US took the initiative to have a new kind of framework. And you can see it on the right here. This is the title page, Artemis Accord, Cooperation, Civil Exploration and Use of the Moon, Mars, Comets, and Asteroids. So this is the solar system. And I've listed in the bottom right the French, because it's available also in French and other languages. Just the title of the different sections of this agreement. Very surprising, because you go to the point where how do you call your spacecraft? It goes to that level of detail. And again, you can find this on the internet, no problem. Last time I checked, 25 nations have signed. You can see that in the lower left. Canada signed, France, Japan, and Ukraine, UAE, Isle of Man, Britain. What's the real translation of Wyoming? It's not Britain, it's United Kingdom and United States. So this is a big effort, multinational effort. And I think that's the reason why the Director General of Roscosmos said Artemis and the gateway is to US. Personal opinion. So what is Artemis? It's a program of lunar exploration. It has 6 components: the Orion spacecraft, launch system, the ground system, the famous lunar gateway. We'll take a look at that. The human landing system, and the base camp, which is on the surface of the moon. I don't know if it's going to look like the one on the right, but it would be great to have this chair looking out the window.
Like a rocket.
Yep. Kind of the visions we had in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Now the Orion spacecraft. This was formerly called the Crew Exploration Vehicle from the Constellation program. You have the dimensions there, 7 meter high. We're talking about the capsule in the middle, 7 meters. No. Probably includes more of the other items. 4 people, 21 days. Lockheed Martin, main contractor, plus ESA, because ESA is doing the service module. This section with a big NASA on it is an ESA provided European Space Agency. They provided hardware. They've been at it for quite a while. Between 2006 and 2020, $21.5 billion have already been spent on this. And don't mistake this for the Starliner. The Starliner is the one that goes to the space station from Lockheed.
Space. No, Starliner is the capsule that competes with Dragon capsule.
Yes, yes. I don't remember which company.
Oh, that's Boeing.
Boeing, yes,
Oh, yeah.
makes sense. Now the Starliner is supposed to be at the station for a while. Hasn't launched yet. It launched uninhabited
A couple
2
of
years ago.
But no, recently, and there's still issues.
There's still issues. So we'll see how far they go, but this is different spacecraft, just to make sure, just to clear things up. So we have in the room here, a very nice model made by Dave and Paul. And I'm not going to point to everything, but anyway, it's the European section is here. This is the crew module, and this is the abort system, escape engines, and so on. The famous SLS is the other part of the Artemis program. It was the constellation area RS5. So they worked on it for quite a few years. It has historical parts from the space shuttle, not only from a design point of view, but actual hardware. The segments, the solid rocket boosters on each side are extended segments from the space shuttle, and some that were used on Artemis 1 have flown before. The main reservoir in the middle is also inherited from the shuttle, but it's not exactly hardware, it's stretch. But it uses the same principles, the same ratio between oxygen and liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, because the engines are from the space shuttle. Not only the design, but actual hardware that was flown on the space shuttle was used for Artemis 1. So those are the 4 engines at the bottom of the main tanks. There are 3 versions, and here a lot of numbers, you can read faster than I can talk, but there are 3 block versions, just like Saturn at the time of Apollo. The one that went on Artemis 1 is the first one here, and I put some numbers of the amount, the mass that it can carry to orbit. Now, when they launched the first time, they said it was the most powerful rocket. I don't have the same numbers because Saturn V had 118 ton in Earth orbit, while the Block 1 is 95 ton. But they will change the hardware of the second stage here. Will change, and then they will Block 2, and the second stage is here for Block 1B. Block 2 is a carbon fiber composite for the solid rocket side on the side, and then they have 130 tons. So then it will be the rocket capable of launching more than the Saturn.
The super stretch version of the second stage.
Right. EUS. I'm not sure what.
Extended upper stage. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Now they've spent a bit of money on this as well. $27.8 billion already spent before 2021. And I was wondering if it's going to be used after Artemis. The SLS found quite a few missions at the bottom that will use the system afterwards. So it's not only
actually that's been the Europa's been canceled from the SLS.
This one
on the Falcon Heavy.
Okay.
Because they're finding that it's just costing too much per rocket.
Yeah, that's my next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Now the NASA, the Office of Inspector General of NASA. This is a bureau inside NASA. And it inspects all kinds of programs at NASA and missions, and critiques the way they're managed and the cost is being handled and so on. They're public reports, very interesting to see. In fact, the one on the SLS this is the link. I just looked for the SLS OIG report. And they found that the launch cost is about $4.1 billion. So you can see here the different numbers. So it's very expensive per launch. But that's one of the challenges of this system. Now, I hope you can see that. Bear with me. These are the SLS missions, the SLS flights that are used for Artemis. So those numbers are flight numbers of the SLS, all right? They match Artemis numbers, but we'll see later that it gets a little bit more complicated. So we've seen the first flight of SLS last year with success. And then the second one will be used for Artemis 2, and that's the one with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. This is supposedly November 2024. I looked.
It'll be pushed back
Will be probably pushed back.
for sure.
2025, yeah, Optimus 3. That will send, again, just Orion. And then Artemis 4, using the fourth flight of SLS, will use Block 1B, and then it sends one of the modules for the gateway. We'll look at the gateway in a minute, but this is one of the modules for the gateway. And then Artemis 5 launches another module of the gateway.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
I understand that Artemis 3 is boots on the moon. That was the promise. Is
Yeah.
that still part of that?
Yeah, forgot to
Rendezvous.
mention.
Okay,
Sorry.
big thing. Oops.
I have another table
Yeah.
that are Artemis missions. And so that's, forgot to mention this. Good. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, no problem. Although will that happen? We'll talk.
Yeah, big challenge. This is the orbit for the mission, the first mission of SLS, which is called Artemis 1, first mission of the program. On the way to the moon, they released 10 CubeSats, 6 are still working. And we saw very interesting images of that. The mission lasts from November 16 to December 11. And if you look at the upper right, in this little box, the mission seemed to have been planned with different durations, but the duration that we saw last year was the shortest of them. So it's all the smallest numbers that you can see in that box. So 26 days total, and so on. So they were successful, sent back very interesting images of the spacecraft, the Earth in the background, on the left as well, and then the moon on the main image here, and an inset as the inside of the spacecraft with an instrumented dummy to measure the effects on an astronaut sitting in there. I was surprised to see that picture. I expect the moon to be a bit more contrasty.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see the very low contrast on the moon, but maybe if you want to expose this, you have a problem exposing this at the same time. I'm not sure that both, well, this is 11% reflection, I think.
Yeah.
This is probably a lot more.
But today we have HDRI, so I was a little surprised myself.
Yeah, I thought I expected a more interesting contrast there, but anyway. Now let's go to another item in the Artemis program, the gateway. Now the gateway, the latest that I have found with this configuration. Remember the I have module that was launched on Artemis, this one, built by ESA and JAXA, so Japanese and European. And the S3 refueler is this guy here, built by ESA. Those would be among the first modules to be launched by SLS. We'll see later on. These other modules like the power propulsion element and the Halo will also be launched shortly. That's Northrop Grumman and ESA, JAXA as well. Maxar is an American company. SpaceX has a Dragon XL, something we haven't seen in real life yet. I haven't seen pictures of that. Orion is the crew capsule that comes in and connects here. And then there is the human landing system, but this is reference concept shown. We'll see.
They just awarded it last week to Blue Moon, but a totally new version. Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
Sure.
Now, one item that on this diagram that hasn't been talked about is the airlock here. That was to be the Russian element. So on the diagram at NASA right now, it says that the provider is TBD. So that was the contribution of Russia to the program. So it's uncertain at this time. Canada provides the arm, main arm, and in the second smaller arm. So that will be our contribution. Now, this is the gateway calendar, right? It's related to Artemis because Gateway is part of Artemis. But this is the schedule of the different launches. And what you see now, you see not only SLS, but you see Falcon Heavy being used. Again, this is a gateway schedule. It's not an SLS schedule, it's a gateway schedule. So you launch the PPE, you just saw in Halo on the Falcon Heavy. No, it's not SLS. And then there is Artemis 3 for human landing, right? But it's not, in fact, it's not going to Gateway. It's just going for lunar landing, this one. Artemis 4 is launching, Artemis 4 with an SLS, is launching the I have module, as I said before, the S3 is going on Artemis 5, and then Artemis 6, other items up to this support mission and up to 7, but SpaceX was chosen in March 2020 to deliver the logistical modules that are listed here. So it's not SLS. So when you find tables like this, it's a bit confusing to try to figure out what launches what. And I've been very surprised at the way this is managed. I feel that there is a different way this is managed from, let's say, the ISS. Because of different contracts that are given at different times, I was a little bit surprised. They're going to the South Pole. Now, the Hayward is also a Chinese destination, and Shackleton is also Chinese, Russia destination. This is the Artemis destination map of those possible locations on the South Pole. The South Pole is here. But a couple of those are common with the Chinese and the Russian expeditions. And I found this image of the Artemis base camp, but I think this is quite outdated, and that's why I have a question mark. Now, the human landing system with SpaceX, it was won in April 2021 against Dynetics and Blue Origin. That's why I put an X on it in the upper right. It's a firm fixed price contract for those who have worked in contracting between cost reimbursable and for fixed price. So this is firm fixed price with milestones, $2.9 billion. So you know how much it's going to cost to start with, which is good. It's the Starship from SpaceX. This is what you see on the right. 50-meter high, 9-meter diameter. It's very hard to comprehend how they're going to send this to the moon, but this is the plan. They've committed to it on a contract for $2.9 billion. And this is the Artemis 3 lunar landing, part of the Artemis program. 2025, 26, 4 astronauts go on an Orion capsule on SLS. And then 2 of them go onto the spaceship, the Starship from SpaceX, and they land on the moon. And one will be a woman. They will stay 1 week on the surface. They return with Starship around the moon. They meet with Orion, and then the 2 that were on the moon go with the 2 that were left in the orbit for a total of 4 astronauts. But there's more. SpaceX was contracted in 2022 to now do the Artemis 4 mission. Okay, it's a little bit confusing, but that's the information I found. And you can see that the sequence is a little bit hard to follow here. And in 2022, they decided to have a new competition for the human landing system. Now they've done that competition once. They gave a contract, and then they decided to compete it again. So very surprising, new competition for the same item. They didn't remove that contract, but a new competition. And they announced in May, just a few days ago, that in fact Blue Origin and Lockheed Martin have won. Supposedly many landers. This is on Artemis 5 now. So this is the lander that Blue Origin and Lockheed Martin have shown in their proposal.
Also totally reusable.
Right.
Supposed to be.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, very surprising way of doing things. Obviously, they have enough funds to not put their eggs on all the same basket. This is the scenario for the HLS using the Starship. This was published in an article, scientific article at IEC, which is a conference for aeronautic. So it's published, it's on the internet, it's a PDF, very serious article. And what happens is that they send a Starship with this is a gas tank. They make it to orbit with this one, then they fill it with many other Starship rockets that bring fuel only. When they have enough fuel in this tank, they launch the human landing system on top of the Super Heavy. They meet and they transfer propellants from this tank to the HLS. In the meantime, they send an SLS with Orion. These guys meet. Two astronauts go from here to here. They land with this Starship. This is a real diagram. I didn't make this up. So the Starship lands on the moon with two crew. They come back. They retransfer into Orion and come back to the Earth. So very surprising, complex sequence. I understand why they're doing it, because the Starship itself, to send Starship to the moon, you need a lot of fuel. You can't just launch Starship fully fueled and not use any fuel and then go to the moon once you're orbiting the Earth. It doesn't work this way. So they need a refueling that needs to be demonstrated as part of this contract. Very exciting to see all that sequence. And with the last launch we saw, was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, of the Super Heavy with the Starship at the top.
Yeah.
Very interesting. We're going to see in the future.
It's been over a month already.
Right.
It's crazy.
Time goes fast.
Yeah.
I find this very exciting. I think that the SpaceX has done some amazing stuff. And I remember being at the government and wondering in the 2005, 6, 7 timeframe, is this serious stuff? And they've really revolutionized the industry. So they can do amazing stuff. So I'm really looking forward to see how that will pan out. Now, do you know about the rover Viper? It's part of Artemis, but not very publicized. To be launched 2024 on Falcon Heavy. It was called Resource Prospector, by the way. It's a private company, but also funded by NASA, several NASA centers for $434 million. This is a big thing. It's going to Nobel Crater, which is one of the targets we saw for the American effort, for the, I guess, the Artemis effort, I should say, because it includes many countries. Go to the South Pole, then 100 days, 20 kilometers. And they're going to look for how you can exploit the soil of the moon, mostly. So it's interesting to see that mission. We don't hear about it much. Blue Ghost, another mission. Now, they've had a contract from NASA in 2021 to build a lander, already $93 million. Going to Mare Crisium, so that's not the South Pole, but they plan to land many scientific experiments. And then recently, in March 2023, they had another contract from NASA for a second mission, 2-stage mission. They're going to the far side of the moon, 2026, and they will have an European Space Agency rover on board. They will leave a Pathfinder in orbit from ESA. And they're publishing that there's still room on board that mission if you want to fly something to the moon. That's exciting as well. Another part of an effort, NASA is paying for it. This one is not associated with Artemis. I'm not sure about the association. Okay, let's look at the arts a little bit. This one closer to home. Jean-Philippe Dallaire lunar inhabitants, habitat de la Lune, 1950. I thought they were looking really good. 1958, that's 1 year after Sputnik. So you can just imagine all the public interest in that. Now, what you've been waiting for, the Canadian contribution to this program, to the Lunar Gateway Institute. Now, robotic-R, we're getting in the orbit module. They are demonstrating planning to be able to grab the main module is one of the toughest by arm to go grab something that's free floating. Very, very difficult. A lot of efforts. There will be a smaller version of the R also there, extras, with just as many axis rotation. I remember when we worked on the Canadarm2 for the space station, grabbing free floating items around the station was a tough call. It wasn't planned originally as a capability of the arm. The arm could handle the whole shuttle, but not just small free floating elements. A little bit more detail. If you've been involved with this kind of international agreement, so it's the Artemis Accord. Yes, go ahead.
Why is it so difficult to grab a free-floating object?
So you need to be able to grab it without almost putting zero effort. You need to be very, very close, but as soon as you touch it, it just goes away. And if you don't touch it exactly at the center of map, it will pivot. So these are the items that, and it's hard from the other side as well. If you want the spacecraft to be very, very still, it needs to have those little fine rockets that keeps it stable for a while, absolutely not moving while you're trying to grab it. And if you're in orbit, you go through an orbit, it doesn't stay in the same place at the same time because the Earth is not a sphere. Gravity changes with different places on the Earth. So the actual item, while it's in space in front of you, is slightly moving because of gravity. And anyway, so that's part of the challenges to grab things. It's doing it. It's doing it. It's just difficult. Also, when you grab something, you can't instantly lock everything with grapples around it instantly. So there is a moment in time that you touch the item, but it can't go away. So you touch it very, very lightly, exactly perpendicular. Otherwise, it's gonna pivot, and then you grab it. And the Canadarm works with steel cables that look like a triangle. It's a triangle of cables. Yeah. It looks like a camera lens, a diaphragm, yeah, an iris. It closes this way very gently, and it brings the probe. There's a probe, it brings the probe in the middle, and then it rigidizes it. So quite a few items. It's important to remember this is a barter agreement. Usually with this big program, Canada provides an arm or provides hardware. There is no money exchange between international partners. So what you need to do is you write an agreement where you exchange things. So we provide the arm, for instance, for the space station. We got astronaut time on the station. We got astronaut seats in the transportation to go to the station, and the Canadian astronauts can stay on the station. You have, you can do science on the station and use time from the other astronauts. Canada has an amount of time it can use every 6 months with astronauts from non-Russian astronauts to do science for Canada. So you can use resources on board, electricity, water, all this is being calculated and kept good record of. And you have also transport credit. When Canada gave the Canadarm2 to the space station program, we inherited at the same time, we bargained several hundred kilos of up mass to the station. For instance, if we want to send an incubator to do a Canadian experiment on plants, which we did, we use that credit of so many kilograms to launch. At the time it was on the shuttle. We've done it on many rockets, still going on today. We're still using those credits we got from the space station arm. So it's a barter. It's interesting to see. No money exchange, usually no money exchange between the international partners.
So it's a quick question on the process of grabbing the spacecraft. Is it manual or is it automated or software driven? Or,
Good question. I believe it's currently manual. On the space station, for instance, I think it's manual. It will be different this time. Yeah. I think it's manual, but most of the arm movements are automatic. They're prescripted because it's too complex to maneuver. The Canadarm2 on the space station has 7 axes of rotation, and you need 2 joysticks with 3 axes of. So you need there's a translational joystick and a rotational joystick, and I've been on the course to maneuver those. And one of the exercises you need to do is you have certain cameras or looking at the arm, you're trying to grab something, and you need to predict with any movement of the joysticks, translational, or in which direction it's going to go in any camera. Now the camera is not necessarily up is this way and the station is this way and so on. So you need to keep that in mind. Very difficult to maneuver. So when you see a big movement by the Canadarm2 on the station, it's automatic. But at the last minute, when they get very close to an object and when they want to grab it, I believe it's still done manually, just in case something doesn't work right and they need to bring the arm back. Because if they push the wrong way, or if the item is still moving certain direction and the probe goes in the end effector touches the side or something, you need to be able to retract the arm very rapidly. So I think it's done only on board by an astronaut that has the camera views and maybe, if possible, a cupola view or something. Right.
and is there any delay between the order of the execution of the movement?
There must be. I don't remember what the number is. I worked on the controllers for each of the axes. I was the system engineer for each of the controllers, but I don't remember. It has 3 embedded loops. One is very quick and is written in the assembly language, and then one is written in C and one is written in Ada. There's a 64 millisecond loop. You can count 64. There's a 60 millisecond loop as well. So we're in the millisecond range, fraction of a second. And you can't go on the ground because the ground is several seconds. And you can't go automatic because always need to be ready to retract the arm in case you see something weird.
Thank you.
Well, so, all right, so I worked on the 2 first. These are a comparison of the 3 arms. Canadarm on the shuttle, Canadarm2 on the space station, Canadarm3 on the gateway. I worked on the first 2. The first one I did some improvements. Canadarm2, I was one of the system engineers designing each joint electronics. And the difference, you can see the differences. But most importantly, between Gateway and Canadarm2 on the space station, this is the one we have. The image at the top is the ISS arm. 7 axes of rotation, so they will be similar. Both can do, I need to mention this, both can do the slinky. You've never seen it on TV live because it takes too much time, but the actual way that the Canadarm2 moves on the station is by, there's a carrier on the main truss on the station, but also it can move from place to place by connecting itself. Let's say this is the shoulder of the arm and it connects here, and then it can disconnect at the shoulder and flip, go somewhere else.
Like an inchworm.
Like an inchworm? Okay, that's right. I remember when we designed this, just figuring out which side is which, what's the configuration also When you disconnect the power, obviously. You disconnect the fiber optic or the camera network, the data network. So when you disconnect, you need to make sure you're in the right configuration. But when you transfer, now you're getting power from the other side. So you have all this electronics, they're switching power from one end to the other, they're switching the cameras and all of that without missing a beat. So it can do the inchworm or the slinky on the station, but it's probably takes like an hour or two. So we've never seen it completely.
Well, just a quick question. So it can't just go anywhere. It has to go to the next point where there's a coupler for power and communications.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are, I think there's even one on the Russian side. You can go and grab, but there are, in fact, there are probes that you can reach on all the modules on the station because most of the modules were assembled using the Canadarm2. So you need to grab each module with a grapple fixture, with power, with data. Yes.
Is there any thought to using magnets, electromagnets, to grab things that are close by or very low?
I don't remember any talks about that. When we were designing it, it was in the late 80s. It flew only in 2001, but in the late 80s, we were already involved in designing it because it was supposed to be launched in 1994. I don't remember any discussions on the magnets. The end effector is inherited partly from the Canadarm from the shuttle, which invented this system of triangular. So I think I'm speculating here, but I think because that worked, they didn't look at anything else. Magnet, I guess you can control the electromagnets, you can apply, but at this time, I don't think there are any magnets involved, except in the motors. It's only with the snare system with the 3 cables, and then you rigidize, you bring the probe in, and then with the Canadarm2, you have grapples at the end. This, if I can point to it, these things have 4 grapples because the shoulder of the Canadarm2 needs to be able to move the space shuttle, the fully loaded space shuttle. It's never been done, but was the original goal for strength, precision. Also, when we were choosing the encoders for each joint. So that was the grapples. You need to grapple with something very, very strong as the shoulder, but that shoulder can become the hand. It needs to move faster with more precision than just the shoulder. It needs to be able to do some more precise work as a hand, but it can be the shoulder. So every joint in the Canadarm2 is identical, electronically and mechanically, except for the axis. Sometimes you have the elbow. It's in this direction, there's a different direction. But all the electronics are identical. What I worked on is these little boxes here. They're called the John electronic unit. And they're redundant, fully redundant. For each joint, 2 motors, 2 gearboxes, 2 electronics. 7 joints, so you have 14 boxes, plus the main computer units and so on with the cameras. So all this needs to work. You need big, strong shoulder, but you need the agile hand as well.
Lots of spinach.
So it was quite a challenge. I remember. Oh yeah, and towards the end, just as an anecdote, towards the end of the development, they asked us to add here a hinge in the middle of the boom. This hinge wasn't there originally. So all of a sudden you need to fold one more axis. Not for working in space, but when you launch it, it was folded. Anyway, so the difference between the Canadarm3 that will be launched for the Artemis program on the Gateway will be more automated, completely automated. If you look at the size, it's half the size, the length of the Canadarm2, half the weight, about 2/3 of the diameter. The booms are usually a carbon fiber and the rest is aluminum titanium. Cameras will be 4K finally, because on the Canadarm right now on the station still SD, high definition. Yeah, it was, they upgraded the cameras, but it was expensive, multi-million stuff. It was still SD upgraded. The big change here is it will be commanded from Canada entirely. Now with this space station arm, the responsibility is being shared between Houston and Canada. We can operate the arm from Canada. There was a big effort to get that agreement with NASA, but it's usually commanded from the United States, from Houston, the main control center for the International Space Station. Now for Canadarm3, it's exciting. It will be completely in Canada. That's a vote of confidence from the international partners as well. Now, this one I translated the title because it doesn't mean much in the acronym in French, but there's a Lunar Exploration Accelerator Program called LEAP that the CSA, Canadian Space Agency, put forward. And this is to develop new technologies and demo them for the lunar program. And it was published as $150 million for 5 years since 2019. That's been going on. So some contracts have been let already for demo and development. And for the rover, I don't know what the latest is on the rover, but there was an appel d'offres for their request for tender, I guess, in 2021. Small details. These are the companies that got the money for the demonstration. 5.9 million. I haven't heard about this one before. Mission Control Space Services, Canadensis, I've heard before, and GC Aerospace. This is new to me. So some money was spent. What's interesting is that, did you know that these already flew on the Japanese mission? Not published at all. I haven't found any information about this, about the Canadian technology being developed for the Gateway program and after this program, being flown on another mission. So do you know about the hakuto-R mission? Very interesting. It is the company that competed in the Lunar X Prize, Google Lunar X Prize in 2007, 2009, 2010 timeframe. It's called iSpace. It's Japanese. They launched in December last year. They had a CubeSat on board. They have a rover from the EAU on board. They had a small robot from JAXA. They had the Canadian technologies, and it reached the moon 26th of April, a month ago. And they lost contact just a few hundred meters above the surface, unfortunately. They were aiming for that portion of the moon, the upper right. That's the Rashid rover from the United Arab Emirates at the bottom right. And that's a picture taken with the Canadian technology from December 2022. It's interesting to see that our technology have reached the moon. They didn't quite land as predicted, but I was watching it live until the last second, and you can see on the face of the controllers the questions, for the last 5-10 seconds were supposed to land. Unfortunately, it didn't go as planned. Problem with the sensors and the software, I think. Integration of the sensor with the software and changes that were done. All right, we're almost there. This is again LEAP. Part of it is the rover, and the agency, the space agency, publishes this video. Now I've tried to find numbers for the rover. I get $130 number of instruments. I presented this at the CSA Astro Club. Club. I say someone in the room, without giving particular numbers, that also yellow numbers. So I got from the buildings. I'm not there anymore. I think we're still working on it, developing that rover. We're still probably negotiating contract with supplier. What's ending at did the camera before for your own machine. Again, it's going to study, it's going to go to the poles. One of the items of Artemis mission. After the Canaveral. Reach Mars. So Canaveral system and the hidden publishers being the companies. I don't know if they're together, if they're working in isolation to get the contract. That I don't know. So there you are. I've been fascinated by the moon. So here, the most interesting stuff I've done as an amateur astronomer is just to look at the moon, take your binoculars, look at the moon while there are clouds going forward. Just thanks for